What has been your overriding feeling about FSG's stewardship of the club?
I think you'd have to weigh it all up and say that they've been fantastic owners. You know, you look at where the club was 15 years ago in a high court battle for its future. They were on the brink of administration. Tom Hicks and George Gillette had driven them to financial ruin, to the point where Liverpool Football Club were available for 300 million. And what they've done since, with the infrastructure in place, the building of a world-class squad, the brand new training facility, all that sort of stuff. You know, Forbes mentioned this actually on LFC TV this week. Forbes, the American finance publication, value Liverpool around about $5 billion now. So it's been an incredible markup, and a lot of that is down to the key decisions that have been made inside the Boston boardroom. So you can say that it has been fantastic ownership. You know, 2 Premier League titles, the Champions League. Could have been a lot more had one or two things gone differently on the pitch itself. So, they've been great for Liverpool. They have, of course, made a few missteps along the way. You know, the decision to try and hike the price of tickets up to £77. You know, that thankfully died of that quite quickly. The Super League farce, you know, trying to trademark the name of the club. You know, there have been one or two mistakes along the way, but more often than not, they have U-turned. They have put their hands up and accepted that it was, you know, they've read the room wrong on that one and moved on. But overall, you know, when you look at the contemporaries, the other owners of other clubs, I think you have to say that they've been brilliant for Liverpool.
That's for me has always been important, the context in which this ownership has occurred, really, and what else other teams have done. Because I think a lot of the sort of criticism that always bounces back to is, could Liverpool have done more or won more? I know Jurgen Klopp's spoken about that, and you know, it gets forgotten at times that ultimately you've got often 11 other players who are trying to actively stop you doing the things so they can win things for themselves as well. And you look at the teams that Liverpool have missed out on trophies too. You know, Real Madrid on a couple of occasions in the Champions League final, Man City on a handful of occasions in the Premier League. You know, these are teams that would be rightfully expecting to be in the mix for those, which is also a consideration. And then it goes down to who else has done what. And that's where I really struggle to kind of get on board with the overriding sense of negativity that appeared to be at times, particularly online, because you've got to go look at Manchester United and look at the absolute mess they've been in after a couple of years of success that you could argue there was just Alex Ferguson holding it all together. They've not improved training facilities. Old Trafford is on the verge of getting knocked down because of that's how sort of bad it is. They've had to seek outside people to come in and take over, etc., etc. And then you've got Man City, and okay, there's still a massive unknown around what's going to happen, if anything's going to happen to them in terms of punishment. That might shine a bit of a spotlight on it. But yeah, it's hard really to look around English football, definitely, and you know, perhaps even to European football and beyond, of anyone who's really doing a better job than what Liverpool were doing in that period.
Yeah, 100%. And you look at the self-sustainable model that the club's always been held to, and that has been a source of criticism from some supporters who've bemoaned the seeming lack of investment in recent times. But you know, you can't level that at them this summer, certainly. And you know, what else would you have argued Liverpool to do? Maybe one or two, couple of instances where maybe they needed a senior centre back in January 2021, for example, maybe a midfielder in 2022. But generally, you've been fantastic owners for the club, and you look at the partnerships now that are growing. You know, and you look at the club website and all these agreements with Peloton and Google, you know, Japan Air, all of these commercial partners that have come on board in recent years to help grow commercial revenues to what will be record levels. You know, the next time Liverpool's accounts are published, which will be, I think, maybe February next year, we're going to see, you know, unrivaled growth, I'd imagine. 10-year deal with Adidas, which has already broken all kinds of records. That will be, you know, a record-breaking partnership. For the metrics, whatever metrics you look at, it will be, you know, setting new records worth well in excess of 600 million across the course of the 10 years. So, you know, where Liverpool were compared to where they are now is night and day. And you have to say a lot of that is down to FSG and their, you know, sort of ability to know when to meddle and when not to meddle. They employ people who make the right decisions in a football sense. Michael Edwards has been key towards that. Ian Graham in his role, and essentially just employing the best in class for the right positions. And, this is the reason they find themselves where they are. And, no one epitomised that more than Jurgen Klopp as manager. And then having to come out of that shadow, Arne Slot comes in and wins the Premier League. So they've called that one right as well. So just a lot of really good decision making across the last certainly 5-10 years.
I think it's also worth remembering that Liverpool were always a bit behind the times. Like Brian Reid wrote a lot about this. I think this is in his book about Hicks and Gillette, and he talks about like commercially, the stuff. And we always feel a little uncomfortable when we talk about the commercial side of things, because for most people, just want to see 11 lads running around. But when you then entering a world of questioning where the money's coming from or why the money isn't as free flow, and then you do have to kind of start off a deeper understanding of where the money comes from. But I remember him talking about when Liverpool won the Champions League in 2005, the club shops closed.
Yeah.
So you can't go and buy all anyone in the city wants to do was go and buy red stuff. You know what I mean? Anything you wanted, and you couldn't. And then it took them, they had things like, it's described as a stock maintenance system that was the equivalent of the stock was kept in a bucket, and when the bucket was empty, there was no system in place to tell them that the bucket was empty. Yeah. Someone had to walk around and go, that bucket's empty, we need to get more stuff to fill the bucket. And these are stupid examples, but that's where Liverpool kind of were, and they've gone around and they've tightened the screws, they've modernised the club in a load of ways that none of us would ever really be kind of privy to. And you'll talk about like the higher and best in class. It goes beyond the pitch. You think about like Tony Barrett being brought into the club was a obviously he kind of ended up as press officer by the by, but he was brought in as a sort of like liaison between fans and the club itself. Even our mutual friend Neil Jones going in there in the last year. There's people in all kinds of departments who are just really smart people who understand the culture as well. Yeah,
100%. And you mentioned then about the commercialisation, I guess, over the last decade or so. And Liverpool have just recently opened a store in Dubai and a store in Shenzhen, is it, in China? So that's their 22nd store that's available now worldwide. So it's a completely different operation to the one it was, you mentioned, in 2005 when, infamously the club shop was shut on May the 26th, 2005, when anyone just wants to go and buy a hat, a scarf, a kit to take the parade, and it was closed. So, they have to take full credit for how the club has been renovated on that side of things. A lot is down to Billy Hogan and the work that him and his team have done on that side of things. And just wherever you look now at Liverpool, there are people who essentially know what they're doing, and this is why they find themselves in a position where they are now, and they're expected to overtake Manchester United for next year's accounts. And the power has shifted on the pitch in recent years in terms of the biggest club in England, and I think now off the pitch we're starting to see those results as well. And
really that's the next challenge, isn't it? And it'd be interesting to see whether FSG are capable of delivering it, because we talk about the sustainable business model, and spending what they earn, and that's cool, but the fear is if everyone else is basically being sugar daddied, then you run the risk of falling behind, just whether or not your approach is fair or not really. So that it is something to definitely keep an eye on. And the thing as well, we talk about the ticket price, and it sparked something in my brain recently where people were talking about WWE and how their ticket sales are through the roof, but the prices have gone through the roof because they've been taken over by TKO, who see that as an opportunity to make more money. But in doing so, there's a lot of people complaining that they're driving your average sort of fan out because it's stopped being affordable in a regular basis. It's now become something that becomes a once in a lifetime thing. And Manchester United are looking to do this by selling licenses to season tickets, apparently, when they change the stadium. Man City are trying to get more premium seats available, more premium price seats. That's going to be a challenge for Liverpool to resist, because as a fan base, we've been able to influence decisions in the wake of Spirit of Shankly, but is that something that they're going to be able to do? We'll have to keep a keen eye on them still for years to come. It might sound to the sort of American hard-nosed business people that it's simple supply and demand, but essentially the more you price out the average match goer, the more
it gets more difficult to have that, iconic Anfield atmosphere that you lean into so often, that you use as your USP, your selling point for the club.
Well, people forget because because there is a thing where you want people who are enthusiastic to be there. So there's a trade off. So you might get a bunch of people who are like, oh my god, this and they'll stay to 96 minutes and beyond. They're not trying to beat the traffic to get off. Yeah. They'll be there and they will be prepared to come and sing their hearts out. But there is a core in the Kop, as an example, of people who are the song starters. They're the people who know the songs. They know songs beyond what your average people know, and they help to maintain that kind of culture. And that's fine balancing act, isn't it? If you want people who want to be there in the ground, but you also want people to be able to kind of be there to hand the traditions on continually as well. Yeah,
100%. And I think maybe, I'm not, that business savvy, but the trade-off for the owners, I guess, is what's the revenue of tickets compared to the TV deals, commercial revenue. Sometimes is it worth, is the juice worth the squeeze, as they say? At a risk of alienating your core fan base by pricing them out. That's a very thorny issue, that, and it's not one that I've got massive expertise in all honesty, but certainly it's one that it's a conversation to be had where you wonder if the X amount of money that they can make from increasing prices, ultimately, is that worth it to lose what makes Anfield, so revered across world football?
And I think just moving on, really, it's the best case scenario is to just never hear of them and never talk about it. I never want to have to say FSG. I never want to have to talk about these people, because ultimately when things are going well, they're never on the agenda. When things are going badly, then they should be. People should be talking about them when things aren't going right, because they are the custodians of the football club, and eventually they will move on and do different things with their lives. I'm certain of it. But we as fans will sort of remain. So it's. In that regard, it's nice that it's really kind of fallen off the agenda in the last 12 months. There's bringing Michael Edwards back in, so many that the tried and trusted in Julian Ward coming back in different roles, etc. Richard Hughes being given the opportunity, Arne Slot having the success in the first year. It is nice to be able to actually focus on the people who are actually having the proper day-to-day active hand in how Liverpool are run, rather than worrying about these ephemeral figures who sit across the pond. Yeah,
100%. The decision to... I think there's two key elements to this. I think Jurgen Klopp telling them that he was planning to step away so early on enabled them the space and the time to properly take a step back and assess what the next sort of post-Jurgen Klopp world looked like. So he tells them he's leaving in November. They announce it in late January. So they've had 6 to 8 months to properly establish how they want to go about it. So it starts with the return of Michael Edwards in a different role as the CEO of football. He then headhunts Richard Hughes, who he's wanted to work with for years. He comes in as the sporting director. Then they take the time to establish who's the right coach, the right fit to become head coach. And then Arne Slot comes in, and then the rest is history. So they deserve huge credit for navigating that superbly. It could have been the easiest thing in the world to get that wrong, in a way that Manchester United did with Alex Ferguson, in a way that has taken Arsenal a fair few years to get Mikel Arteta on board with the right sort of squad that will enable them to compete. So they deserve big credit for that, but also they deserve big credit for knowing that there are other people out there who can make these decisions, if you see what I mean. It wasn't necessarily that John Henry was thinking, well, the guy at Bournemouth's doing a great job, let's get him in, or, this Feyenoord manager's, he's the next big thing. It's essentially being able to recognise that someone like Michael Edwards will be able to get this right, and that is where the real wisdom comes in for me, the ability to know who to trust with these decisions.
That was a clip from Journo Insight. To check out the whole show, head to redmenplus.com or click the link in the description.